Hi everybody, welcome to Do You Believe on Paranormal Zone TV. Thanks everyone for joining me tonight. For all of you who are just joining the show for the first time, if you would please subscribe to my channel, I'd really appreciate. Don't forget guys, give the show a like. And tonight, I'm so excited. I have Paul Eno back as a guest. I just love having Paul on the show. And tonight, our show is on the most haunted house in America, the most documented haunted house in history. And so everybody, I want to introduce to you, and so honored to have Paul back on the show. Hi Paul, thanks for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Lorraine. Nice to be back.
Paul, would you please tell the viewers about yourself before we start?
Okay, well, I have been at this for about 45 years. I started when I was studying for the priesthood, and I got into some cases that really convinced me that we're dealing with something entirely different. In 1977, the seminary had enough of me because they didn't like my paranormal work, and out I went. And I blundered into the career of journalism in New England, and I've had a pretty good career doing that. But I've always kept up with paranormal research, and it led from the ghost thing into UFOs and other forms of it, and that's what my son and I do now. He joined me in 2005, and we host, I've written several books, and we host Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno, was on CBS Radio for 4.5 years, and now on WOON 1240 in the Boston Providence area. And it's 6 o'clock on Monday evenings. And if you're stuck in traffic in Boston and Providence, you have a choice between a couple of news shows and us, so it's up to you.
And you also have a website.
Yes, behindtheparanormal.com and newenglandghosts.com.
Yes, and guess what? I posted them the correct way this time.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, Paul, let's get into this the most haunted house at 966 Lindley Street. And you know all about this. Well, you were 21 years old when this was occurring.
Yeah, I was there for most of the most dramatic parts of it. What occurred was I was a seminary student, and it was the beginning of Thanksgiving vacation, 1974. And I had been, since 1972, I had been involved with Ed and Lorraine Warren, the well-known Connecticut, probably grandparents of today's ghost hunters.
So wait a minute. And, Paul, what do you mean you were involved? I didn't know you had an involvement with the Warrens.
Oh, sure, yeah. That's well, you've only known me for about 10 years. I mean, what the heck do you know, right? I mean, what happened was that I wrote my first case was in 1971 in Connecticut, and there was an abandoned village and all this business, and several of us went in there, including a photo expert, and we were knocked between the eyes with bizarre phenomena, like right from the get-go. But they were phenomena that sort of indicated to me that you're not. These were not dead people. I mean, it didn't seem like they were dead at all. I thought we were dealing more with time, things of that kind. But that's for another story. That's another story. So I wrote an article about that for a Roman Catholic publication, and Lorraine Warren read it and contacted me because they thought my idea that ghosts could be souls in purgatory. I mean, that's where I was then theologically, right? She thought that was a very interesting idea. So I went down to meet them, and we became friends, and we became actually rather close. Ed was kind of like the father I didn't have and that kind of thing, because my father had died when I was really little. And that's how that began. So in 74, this was really one of the first major cases that I worked on them, or I worked on with them. And I was home from the seminary for Thanksgiving vacation. It was November 24th, a Sunday. And Lorraine, who was a tremendous cook, said, "Come on down for dinner." So I didn't argue with her, and off I went. And as soon as I got there, it's funny, I had a flat tire on the way down. Had I not had a flat tire, I might have missed them because they were in Bridgeport because they'd been called on this case. And then the days before cell phones and all this business, they didn't have any way to let me know. But as it happened, I pulled into their driveway in Monroe, Connecticut, and Lorraine came, leaping out the door and asked me if I was in a high spiritual state, which I wasn't really particularly able to say yes, but she said, well, this was going on. And so down I went with Ed in their car, which had the Connecticut license number GHOST, strangely enough.
Oh.
And also involved was Father William Charbonneau, a priest of the Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Hartford. So there were 4 of us who initially were involved in this. And Lorraine went down with Father Bill, as he was called, and I went down with Ed, and I walked into the house, and the first thing I saw was the place was in complete chaos, physically speaking. In other words, there had been a lot of, something had torn things off the walls, primarily religious pictures and things of this kind. Something had put all sorts of clothing into a baby carriage and had wheeled it around. There were police officers in there at this point, and the first thing that happened was Mrs. Gooden, this was Gerard and Laura Gooden, a couple in their 40s, who had an adopted child, Marcy Gooden, who was 10 years old and only died in February, unfortunately, of MS. Terrible situation there. So Mrs. Gooden grabbed my arm. I hadn't been introduced to her. Said, "Have you ever seen anything like this before?" And I hadn't. And they were completely flummoxed. What had happened was that there had been pounding on the walls for several weeks before this. This sort of thing starts, and I don't believe what I believe then. I think that these are parasitical entities that feed upon us. And we've talked about that before on your shows. And what happened was that it starts small, such as the pounding or tapping, and as you get more annoyed or frightened or angry, whatever's doing it, this parasitical entity gets stronger and stronger. I believed as we went that there were 4 of them in this house. The Warrens were convinced this was demonic, and so did I at the time. My theological training said that. And our primary purpose was to get the Diocese of Bridgeport, the Roman Catholic Diocese of Bridgeport, to approve an exorcism of the house. And Father Bill Charbonneau had blessed the house. Another priest had come in before that and done that. And you can do that without any kind of permission. But an actual exorcism, which is what they were contemplating, had to be authorized by the bishop, the local bishop. So here we were sitting around doing that. And, of course, the thing with the Warrens, or Ed particularly, was that he had no qualms about calling in the press on this. Something I never do, which is ironic because for 35 years I've been a professional journalist in New England. So the last people I'd call in would be reporters. So there were reporters in and out of this place at all times during my 3-day involvement there. The police had been called in when the pounding had gotten to the point where the people couldn't stand it anymore. City engineers had come in. Of course, this is before we got there. This is in the weeks before November 24th. The city engineers and others said that it wasn't anything that was going on nearby. Construction-wise, there was a hospital nearby where some construction was going on, but they said that had nothing to do with any sounds. So they couldn't really put their finger on what it was. They got recordings of it, and those still exist. There was a police officer, John Holsworth, who was a friend of the family, and on this particular Sunday morning, when things really got crazy, they called him in. Now, strange things had begun to happen the day before, Saturday, when the family had gone to New York City, which was not maybe 50 or 60 miles from Bridgeport, to go shopping, which is something they did every other Saturday. They came back, and the television in the little girl's bedroom was on her bed. And, it hadn't been broken or anything. It hadn't fallen off. It was just been moved. And then on Sunday morning, things really got crazy. Mr. Gooden, Jerry, walked into the kitchen. All these knives and forks came flying out of the drawer in the kitchen and started flying around the room. Refrigerator lifted itself up by itself, turned around, and set back down again. This happened several times, and I was a witness to one of those with Bridgeport police officers standing on my right and firefighters standing on my left. They called Patrolman Holsworth in, who was off duty, and he called in some of his colleagues who were on duty, and in came the police officers. There are a number of reports from the police officers, and I can read you one, if I may.
Yeah, please.
This is from Captain Charles Baker from Patrolman Joseph Tomek, and it's November 74, sir, at 10:11 a.m., and RCG 35, that's the patrol car, was detailed to Lindley Street on a report of strange activity going on inside the house. On arrival, Patrolman Joseph Tomek and Carl Leonzi observed the inside of the house in disarray, furniture, pictures, religious articles, personal belongings, etc., were thrown all about in all the rooms except one. While conducting the initial investigation, Patrolman Joseph Tomek, Carl Leonzi, George Wilson, and Leroy Lawson observed one or more of the following happen. The refrigerator rise approximately 6 inches off the floor. A 21-inch portable television set in the living room rise off a table and turn around. Furniture move away from the wall and fall over. Objects on shelves and hanging from the wall start vibrating. Also observed was a lounge chair that Marcia, the little girl, was sitting in, move rapidly backwards and overturn. When officers at the scene tried to move the chair, they did so with great difficulty. And on, and on, and on. This is an official document of the Bridgeport Police Department dated 24 November 1974. There were others as well. There were mentions that Father Doyle from the local Roman Catholic Church came and blessed the place, and et cetera, et cetera. Here's another report talking about the Warrens coming in. The unidentified neighbor telephoned Mr. Edward Warren, not his real name, who was a psychic researcher specializing in this kind of phenomenon. On his arrival, he interviewed all parties that were involved. He stated he believed the events to be caused by a phenomenon being pronounced by Marcia called poltergeist, being produced by Marcia called poltergeist, spelled wrong, but that's the point. Anyway, that's sort of on. There are a number of official police documents to that extent talking about these things. I made it a very serious point not to mention my last name, because I didn't want to get in trouble with the seminary authorities. I was kind of in the doghouse most of the time anyway because of this, and I didn't want to push my luck. At the time, I was a student at Wadhams Hall Seminary in Ogdensburg, New York. But of course, they all heard about this on the news because it got out on the wire services, and the press was everywhere. People began gathering outside the house. At one point, there was an estimate that about up to 10,000 people were gathered on this little side street, up and down,
Paul,
watching.
The viewers are saying how small the house is, and I don't think we gave them how small it really was.
Absolutely, yeah, I should have mentioned that. Very small, really officially like a 3-room house, very small bungalow. There was one next door just like it. And as I say, this was just this older couple, and they had adopted this little girl. And of course, their son had a natural son who had passed away several years before. And of course, everybody says, "Aha! Must be the jealous ghost of the." I mean, give me a break. I don't believe any of that stuff. So, but anyway, very small house. The little girl's room had been made out of a large closet, as a matter of fact.
Oh my God!
So that's one of the things people notice. From one point of view, how could all this stuff happen in such a small place? And it did, because I saw it with my own eyes. And in the second place, how could the later accusation that the little girl was doing all this have possibly been perpetrated in front of trained observers, journalists, police, and firefighters in this little tiny house? I mean, it's ridiculous. And of course, the main critics are people who weren't there to see it for themselves.
So, Paul, this house, what did it have? It was like, I think there was only 4 rooms in that house, wasn't it? It was 738 square feet.
Yeah, well, if you count the little girl's room that, as I say, had been a closet, you could say 4 rooms. Yeah, it was primarily a kitchen, a living room, and a master bedroom, which was the parents' bedroom.
Oh, my God. How can you live in something like that?
Well, I don't know. I didn't live there, but they did.
Wow.
I don't know. It's perhaps they were ahead of their time. The tiny house trend has begun to catch on in America.
I could not find any pictures of the family whatsoever. None.
There are a few in William J. Hall's excellent book, The World's Most Haunted House, and I would recommend that people who want to find out more about that, get a hold of it. But the thing is that I was not planning on a case. I mean, I never got my dinner, for one thing, and secondly, I didn't have any equipment with me, no cameras, no recorders, nothing. All I had was a little prayer book that had a story attached to it in itself, in this case, that I just happened to have with me, but I didn't have any equipment. I mean, today I would know better, and of course everybody today has smartphones that can do half this stuff, take pictures and everything. So, but the only pictures really were from the media and reporters who were there, and Bill has in his book some pictures of the family and of the little girl and this sort of thing that he got hold of. He's an excellent researcher, and it's a very good book. So, but yeah, it is difficult to find pictures of the family.
Yeah, I couldn't find anything. Now, this Marcia that they adopted, did they know anything about her before they had adopted her?
Well, just the usual. There are the documents and things and that sort of thing. She was from the Iroquois tribe in Ontario, Canada, and that was what I was told when she came in. She was 10 years old at the time. She had been there for a few years. But the thing that I noticed right away was that she had been extremely smothered with protection. I was told that she had, when I first went in, she was in the basement. There was a little cellar talking with this enormous police officer, and he was kind of already had his notion that she was the one who was doing all this stuff, and he was kind of prodding. And that's my first meeting with Marcia, and she had a cat. But she was a lovely little girl. She had been adopted from, I guess, one of the reservations in Ontario, and had come to live with the Goodens, and that had happened a few years before. But she had been bullied at school, physically abused at school, and she'd hurt her back, and her parents had kept her in the house for 6 weeks before we got there. And that, looking back on that's a sure sign that you've got a lot of pent-up energy that might ring the dinner bell for one or more of these parasitical entities I'm always talking about. And I think that's probably what happened here.
Now, at one point, didn't the sheriff or the superintendent or whoever he was of the town or city wanted it all stopped? So I read that he had stated that Marcia said that she had been doing all of this.
Well, that's nonsense, because that Superintendent Walsh of the Bridgeport Police Department, he came out Tuesday afternoon. Well, what happened on Tuesday is interesting, and there were a lot of things that happened between Sunday and Tuesday. But on Tuesday afternoon, we'd been there all this time, and we had to get something to eat. You know, I just wanted to go home and take a shower. My home was 60 miles away, and this sort of thing. And as soon as I left, Mrs. Gooden hugged me and said, "Would you please promise us that you will come back?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll be back about 2 o'clock this afternoon." So I headed back up Interstate 95 toward East Hartford, where I lived at the time. And I turned on WCBS radio in New York, and the first thing I heard was that the police had declared the whole thing a hoax perpetrated by the child. And I said, "What the hey is this about?" So I just came from there, saw it myself. And of course, there was the mayor and everybody had said, this is ridiculous. The whole city's tied up in knots. You got to clear this up. So that was the idea, that they were going to declare it a hoax and people would disperse and the press would go away and this kind of thing.
Right.
Well, of course, no police officer that I'm aware of ever retracted his story about what he saw in the house. Many of them are quoted in Bill Hall's book that I just mentioned. So I got home and took a shower and had a few phone calls from people who knew me and said, "What's going on?" And then I headed back, and I got there at about 2 o'clock that afternoon. And the first thing that happened was Mrs. Gooden, who had made me promise to come back, saw me out in the yard and ordered a police officer to throw me off the property, which he promptly did.
Oh my God.
So I kind of blundered back to the Warrens' house about 10 miles away, and they said, "Oh, well, it's a good thing, you came here because this is what happened." Again, today you'd be able to make a call to somebody to tell them. But I didn't find out what was happening until I got back to their house at perhaps 3 o'clock that afternoon.
Oh my God. So and the Warrens say that this is, on a scale from 1 to 10, this is a 10. As far as
well, in 45 years, I've dealt with two very, very serious knockdown, drag-out poltergeists, and this was one of them. But it wasn't the worst. The next one was the following year, actually. And these things kind of happen and they kind of blend and this sort of thing. But this one was good. Probably the most bizarre thing that happened to me that really shook me up the most was on Monday evening of this period, when the Warrens had left to go, I guess, do a television show or something. And there was a reporter from the Bridgeport Post, John Sopko. There was the family, the two Goodens and the little girl, and there was a neighbor. And Monopoly was Marcia's favorite game, so she and I were kind of playing that. And all of a sudden, there seemed to be a disturbance in the kitchen. Mr. Gooden went into the kitchen, and you could see it was almost filling up with a kind of almost filmy, whitish, gauzy kind of almost smoke. not too thick, but just enough to see. And all of a sudden, Gooden starts chanting in Latin in this beautiful bass voice that sounded like, to me, like something out of the funeral mass, right? So I'm trying to get by that, and all of a sudden he comes back into the living room, and something seemed to follow him. There were, in my opinion, 4 entities that seemed to come out of Marcy's room, which adjoined the kitchen, into the little kitchen, up this little hallway into the living room. You could see very vaguely these sort of 4 gauzy kind of structures. Now, one of them came toward me. I was reading a prayer from a book, this book I mentioned that has, as I say, its own story. And I was chanting this prayer. And one of these things stood right in front of me. I knew it was trying to get to the little girl. I instinctively pushed against it. It pushed back, which threw me. And I felt bone structure. I felt a physical being.
Oh my!
And it got around me, threw her across the room. This is where I learned that you don't get angry, you don't get emotional, because I got angry with it because it was after the little girl, and it got stronger and stronger because of my anger. That's where I learned. You have to be absolutely Buddhist when it comes to these things, and when you're in their presence. So I didn't know what else to do. The power in this room, our hair was standing up practically. I said, everybody out. Fortunately, the police had cordoned off both ends of the street so that we didn't walk out into the middle of a crowd. That would have been awful. And we went out. It started to sleet a little bit, but I rather would have had that than the crowd. And I said, I have to contact the Warrens. Again, long before cell phones, so I went next door to a neighbor's house to ask if I could use the telephone. Well, something apparently followed me. This really nasty-looking little dog came barreling out of the bushes, started to bark at me, and all of a sudden yelped and ran back into the bushes. I usually don't have that effect on dogs, so something else must have. I knocked on the door. A little boy answered the door and said, Mommy, the priest wants to use the phone. Now, they mixed me up with Father Bill all through this. I mean, I wasn't wearing clericals or anything, it wasn't known that I was a seminary student. Anyway, I walked in. Something knocked on the door behind me. There wasn't anything there. And the family was in this little house was terrified, but they let me use the phone. I called the Warrens. I said, you got to get back in here. I told them what happened. It took them an hour to drive 10 miles from Monroe to Bridgeport because of all the traffic generated by this thing. They finally got back. We went back into the house. Everything had dissipated. And the first thing we heard on the radio was they were speculating about why we had left the house. So everybody was in on this. So that was probably the weirdest thing. But there were plenty of other things that happened while I was in there. At one point, this was on Sunday, actually Monday morning. I was in the kitchen, and people were having coffee. There was a police officer. There were a few others, and all of a sudden, I was standing in back of Marcy's wooden kitchen chair. I had my hands on the back of it. All of a sudden, it started to rise up, and I pushed it back down, and it was as if something let go. And I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't pushed it back down. I mean, she might have been carried by the chair across the room. I don't know. At another point, this was in the evening, she and I were standing in the kitchen with, again, people were sitting, having coffee, that sort of thing. Warrens were there. And there was a console television set, a floor model kind of thing. And there were some flowers on top of it that suddenly started to move. And Gerard Gooden, who had experience with this, sort of said, oh no, the TV's going to go over. So I kind of felt in back of it. It felt very cold around it. And all of a sudden, this television went over like in the flickering of an eyelash. I mean, how it didn't smash into smithereens on the floor, I don't know. Unfortunately, my leg was in the way, so it knocked me across the room, and I had the girl with me. It was just, I had a real gash there. Nothing was broken, fortunately, but I had a sort of a battle scar with my, to commemorate my battle with the poltergeist.
Oh, jeez.
And again, there was at one point Lorraine Warren was sitting at the table, and I was sitting right across from her, and I watched this whole thing happen. All of a sudden, the blister from a second-degree burn appeared on her hand, and she said, she had a little expression of pain, and all of a sudden it just appeared. Nobody was smoking. There was no heat source. and I guess Lorraine was a sort of a psychic medium type thing.
Yeah.
And Ed said, "I want you out of this house. Spontaneous human combustion could occur here." Which, of course, is I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a pretty horrific phenomenon in which people simply burst into flames for no reason and burn to a crisp, basically. But she wouldn't leave. So, I mean, these are examples of things that happened in the house. At another point, there were tables flipping over and in the living room and this sort of thing. There was a huge dresser and the chest of drawers in the little girl's room. It must have weighed 200 pounds. It flew across like it weighed nothing and hit the wall. And this went on and on and on until finally we got thrown out of the thing by the cops as soon as we left. And Ed Warren and I spent the next few days on the radio battling back and forth with the cops. But that's how it ended. As far as what occurred after that, supposedly the little girl, Marcia, was taken to Fairfield Hills Psychiatric Hospital or State Hospital, which mercifully is now closed. And things apparently happened there as well. It's funny, I worked in two state hospitals, not that one in New York and one in Connecticut, in days of, just around this time, studying these sorts of things. And things did happen in psychiatric hospitals that they couldn't explain. And that's where they call in the priests and myself.
So why did they take her to the psychiatric hospital?
Well, there was a lot of people who bought this stuff that she was doing this, and they wanted to give her a psych evaluation, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know what exactly happened with that, but shortly after that, early in '75, the crew from Duke University came in, several of whom I knew. They were the Duke University in North Carolina used to have a parapsychology laboratory. It morphed in later years into the Rhine Center, which still exists. And Keith Harari and a few other people came in, and he's now Dr. Harari. He's John F. Kennedy University Parapsychology Program. And they're the ones who did many of the diagrams that are now better known because of Bill Hall's book. And they interviewed all the witnesses, including myself. There was Boyce Beatty, who's still around in Connecticut. He's retired now, but he was involved in that investigation and interviewed me. I remember, I can remember the conversation, and Bill Hall got hold of the actual tape of the conversation, and I heard myself interviewed after 40 years. It was quite an experience last year.
Oh gosh.
So anyway, that's but Harari told me later on that they never even. Jerry Solfin told me later on that they never even wrote an in-house report on it because they couldn't put their finger on anything. So, but then years later, Bill Hall came along, and now everybody knows everything. So, and I wrote about it in my 1998 book, but only in a chapter.
Okay, so let's do a timeline, kind of. The 7-year-old little boy dies of. They move into this house in 1960. The little 7-year-old little boy dies of what? Cerebral palsy? Yeah, cerebral palsy. Then, how soon after did they adopt Marcia?
I'd have to look that up, but I believe it was about 5 years.
5 years after his death?
That's ballpark, yeah.
Okay. Then, in 1973, all this poltergeist activity started?
Well, strange things started to happen off and on. As I say, they always start slowly. And it's very unusual for them not to, because the thing has to gain strength first. The general theory of the poltergeist, as expounded in parapsychology, and I think it's one of those things that says we don't know any other way to put it, is that someone in Marcia's case who has been maybe as a child reaching puberty or is having whatever emotional difficulties may be going on, that occurs, and they can produce these sorts of phenomena. I mean, I think that's not the case. I mean, the closest thing I can find to that in paranormal history is the Toba Phenomenon, which is known in Tibetan Buddhism. And what that's about is that a monk, as a spiritual exercise, can deliberately meditate and produce what they believe is a spirit or something like this, and it'll do what he wants. But then of course it's not recommended because very often you can't get rid of the thing.
Do you believe that she was causing this poltergeist activity?
No, I think she was the dinner bell. Her whole situation was. I don't believe in that approach. I've seen too much of it to believe that. I think a lot of people that come up with the theories about what poltergeists are have never seen one, and let alone been injured by one or hit in the nose by one or anything. I think that what happens is you've got parasitical entities who are drawn to the food available in a situation like this. A kid who is producing this kind of anxiety or whatever is just a food source.
So was she a troubled child?
I would say yes. People told me later that she was very sneaky, that she was would do sneaky things behind her parents' backs, and this sort of thing. Now, as I observed it, now my job in this, Ed Warren asked me to keep an eye on the girl precisely to make sure she wasn't doing any of these things. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, you sort of get to know what kind of person this is. She seemed to be very excited about all the attention she was getting. And that always makes me wonder because, and I see that very commonly in cases like this, where people, especially young people, they're maybe smothered by their parents, or they maybe are failing in school and everything, but all this attention is here, and she loved having all the people there because she was, practically a prisoner. So that was interesting. And there were times when she would try to move a chair or something, and everybody turned and said, "Aha, she's doing all this." She'd like maybe tap it, and the police would say, "Aha, it's you." Which of course was nonsense. Naturally, anybody of that age is kind of excited by all this weird stuff that's happening. You're gonna push something, maybe it'll move by itself. That's all I saw. Then there were several subplots to this. One was the alleged talking cat.
Oh yes, what about the cat?
Well, that's right. The cat's name was Sam.
Uh-huh.
And Marcia told me that Sam was her best friend, right, or her only friend. So that said something. And so she had this cat with her pretty much all the time. She would hold it close to her neck, and this cat was a saint or something because he put up with all this. And she would throw her voice. I mean, I was convinced it was her. However, Jerry Gooden, who struck me as a very kind of no-nonsense, although sad sack kind of guy. I don't blame him with a family like this, but he swore that cat would be in the cellar, would come to the top of the stairs, would pound on the door and demand to be let out of the cellar. And he swore the cat would shout that he was a quote, dirty Frenchman, because Quebec name was Godin, and a dirty rat, let me out.
I read that. I couldn't believe that.
Well, I couldn't either. But I mean, the man, I never found the man, except for that Latin episode, although he said he knew Latin from being an altar boy. I don't know too many altar boys who absorbed that much grammar and stuff just from that, but that's what he said. But in any case, he was, I thought, a pretty square-shooting guy. He didn't seem like he was trying to pull any of this, and he seemed like it was really making him miserable. But he swore that cat came up. As a matter of fact, the way he put it was that the cat had been to the vet, and he must have, quote, swallowed a mynah bird, unquote, right? And that's why he could talk. But I don't know. But I never heard the cat say anything. But I think in a life full of seeing strange things, Noreen, I have to tell you that one of the strangest things I ever saw was network reporters from NBC, CBS, and ABC holding microphones up to this cat and begging it to say.
Oh my God! Oh,
precisely.
That's hilarious.
This was close enough to New York for them to just come riding up 95, and there they
Paul,
were.
But that is the funniest
35
thing.
years as a journalist.
I would have died. I would have died if I had seen that. Oh my God! They're serious?
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh, that is so, picturing that in your head is so damn funny. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, now I had read also that Marcia was dabbling in the occult. Is that true?
Oh, no, it's not. As a matter of fact, my book is responsible for that rumor. Okay? This is how urban legends get started. Okay?
Oh.
I never saw any evidence whatsoever that she even was interested in the occult. What happened was this. I had this little book. Now, too bad we don't have the video here, because I have this little book. I don't know, it's a small pocket-sized prayer book, and it had a Russian Orthodox cross on the front of it, which doesn't look like an ordinary cross. It's got the 3 bars on it, the main one, and then one on the top representing the sign that Pilate put there, and then the footrest on the bottom, which is tilted a little bit because of a tradition about the good thief or the wise thief, and that all gets into the Bible story. Mm-hmm. But that's what was on the front. So anybody seeing that would think, well, gee, that's a weird symbol. What is it? Now, I had this laying in the living room on a table with all these cops and firefighters and reporters coming and going. Now, Marcy carried it around sometimes. Now, if you open this book, on one side is English, and on the other is Church Slavonic, which is written in the Cyrillic alphabet. So it looks really strange. The translation that came down over the years was that Marcy had this book. It was occult, and it was written in Sanskrit, the Indian language, right? And it wasn't Sanskrit, it was Slavonic, which I suppose would be just as mysterious to the ordinary garden variety person on the street as any other language would be. So that's not true. That got magnified. Her carrying this book around and people just taking a glance at it got magnified into Marcy was interested in the occult. Oh. So that's nonsense.
Oh, okay.
And Bill Hall straightens that out. I even brought the book to show him, and he has a picture of it in there.
So how can a poltergeist lift a refrigerator?
I'm not sure that a poltergeist did lift a refrigerator.
Okay.
The background, because the funny thing is, I noticed that when I felt these presences of these 4 entities, or one of them at a time, it was never or almost never at a time when anything was moving. And that made me wonder, maybe it's not any entity actually doing this moving of objects. Maybe it's the conditions, electromagnetic or otherwise, that take place around them when they manifest, or that permit them to manifest in our world, that are creating, I suppose, disruptions in the laws of physics. Now, here's what I mean.
Okay.
I believe that what's happening here is that we have intersections and overlaps between parallel realities. Now, this is fringe physics, but it's still good physics, quantum physics in particular. And we've talked about this many times, the parallel world idea, as opposed to the spirit world thing that is generally accepted. I think it's much more likely that quantum physics is onto something, and it's pretty much not a theory anymore. It's just a question of how you interpret it, that there are many, many parallel worlds all around us with many versions of us. Some are entirely alien, and many have entirely different laws of physics. So what I think probably might have been happening with this refrigerator is that we're all standing there like fools, and you've got world intersects going on, and you can feel your skin kind of crawling and stuff. And perhaps there was a brief intersect whereby that refrigerator was weightless. Strange as it may seem, in a parallel world where the laws of physics were very, very different. Passed through, and then it dropped back down again. I don't really think that in most cases entities are actually deliberately moving these objects. Here's another example of what I'm talking about. If you hear the doorbell in your house and you run out of a room, you may stir up some air that knocks some papers off a table, say, or off your desk. All right, you haven't deliberately done that, but you have created the conditions, or the conditions exist, by which those have fallen off the desk. It's that sort of idea. Mm-hmm. That could be wrong. I don't know. Maybe they really are doing these things. But that also raised the question, if you have a non-physical entity, and because of my experience there, I started to realize these are not non-physical entities. They're just in a parallel reality and only partially in our world. If you have a non-physical entity like a spirit, because that's the definition of what a spirit is a non-corporeal entity, how could it have any influence over matter as we understand it? And that's always bothered me. How can you get electronic voice phenomena, so-called spirit voices, if they don't have vocal cords? I mean, how do you do that? I mean, I suppose there might be possibilities, but that's what made me question the classic ideas on these things. So I don't think it really was poltergeist moving these things.
Wow. Now, I read that Ed and Lorraine Warren described it as inhumanly entities.
Well,
and
they
evil.
thought they were demons.
Yeah, evil spirits.
They sort of operated and still, I guess, operate from what I can see on, because I lost touch with them about 1978 because I didn't agree with what I was seeing. They sort of have this sort of pop theology that really was not legitimate in the sense, at least not what I was learning in the seminary. In other words, people have these sort of folksy ideas about what's going on here, and they run with it. They believed these were demonic entities, in the classic sense, servants of Satan, this kind of thing, and that's why they were attacking religious objects. Well, I mean, that's really not entirely accurate. Yeah, religious objects do come in here, and I have seen crosses in the name of Christ, really have an effect on these things, but sometimes they don't. It all depends on the faith of the people involved. And the question is, do things like holy water and crosses have power in themselves? And yeah, I suppose, maybe. Mm-hmm. But it's the power that they evoke in ourselves to protect ourselves with the power of our own minds that I think really has the effect. And I was present for 10 exorcisms in my seminary days, and 3 of them on the same person. And sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't work. And as I look back, I think something entirely different was going on than the devil being involved here. Now, these parasites certainly fill the bill as far as being, I suppose, quote, demonic in the folklore and classic sense. But I don't think their theology is the same by any means. So the Warrens were talking about demons.
Yeah. So Ed and Lorraine Warren were brought in. How long? Now, this went on for a whole year, right?
Well, from start to finish, if you want to consider the initial tappings, and then into the Christmas season in December of '74, when supposedly the Christmas tree would float around, and Gooden had to sink it in concrete, into the hospital period there, the Fairfield Hills Hospital, where the girl was examined, into '75 when the Duke University team and Boyce Beatty and that group were in there as well. You could figure this about a year. Now,
I also understand that I'm showing in the picture of the house the way it used to look with the swans at the entrance, that those actually moved. There were cement statues.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, when you've got a lot of people, I mean, they stood at Fatima and said the sun was falling out of the sky. I mean, there's going to be some kind of group reactivity here. Now, I wasn't at Fatima, and I didn't see it for myself, but I was at Lindley Street. And I never saw any evidence that the swan was moving. But that being said, just because I didn't see it doesn't mean something like that couldn't have happened, because I've been involved in cases where people I trusted swore that statues had moved and things of this kind. And again, I think you might have had a pass-through world intersect where the statue was in a different position. I mean, I think that's the best way to explain it. But I don't really know for sure about these swans.
Okay. I mean, that's, wow. Now, they also said that Ed and Lorraine Warren had a plastic cross, and it was flown across the room, and they actually have a small piece of that today.
I didn't see that. I was not aware of anything like that happening.
Okay. Well, that's a story.
And I was there when they were there.
Okay, that's a story that
it could have happened, but I didn't see it. Okay. And it was hard not to see it if you're in that tiny house.
Oh, yeah. Now, so were they involved the whole time that all this activity was going on?
Well, they came in with me on Sunday morning. Actually, they were there once before I got there. Okay, that was because they were called about 8 o'clock Sunday morning, the 24th of November '74. I guess Lorraine came back as she knew I was coming, and then we all ended up there that afternoon, and then I was there probably a little bit longer than they were on Tuesday, and then left. And then, as I say, when I came back in the afternoon, I was thrown off the property. So, we were there pretty much at the same time.
So what were they doing? Were they there on a daily basis?
Yeah, we didn't leave really. We were there. I at one point I went out just to go to a convenience store to get a couple of things for us to eat because we hadn't eaten anything.
Oh my God!
And I had to walk out through the crowd. And I came back in, and then later it was said that I must have brought in drugged candy.
Oh my God!
In order to cause people to think this stuff was happening. I mean, the goofy explanations the cops came up with later were more ridiculous than what actually happened. So there was that, and then we did leave at one point on Sunday night. We went back to the Warrens to kind of have a powwow there, and then and we got some. I can't remember that. No, that was Monday night. We went back because they wanted to get me out of there after what had happened with these entities, and we went back to their house. Father Charbonneau stretched out on the couch. I stretched out in a chair. And 8 o'clock Tuesday morning, they called and said that it was happening again. So back we went. And that's the only time we weren't in the house was over Monday night.
All right, so they were there. What exactly were they doing? What were they doing?
That's the thing. He was making phone calls. As a matter of fact, Gooden had a fit at the phone bill later on. He called Father Alphonsus Trebold in New York State at St. Bonaventure University, who was a Franciscan monk who was up on this stuff, and he was giving them advice. And they were trying to reach the Diocese of Bridgeport to get, as I say, a permission to do an exorcism. So a lot of the times we were just in there waiting for somebody to call us back about this stuff, and then things would be happening. Not all the time, but frequently. Things flipping over, people coming and going. In fact, there were several points where people just walked in off the street and started looking around, and the police had to throw them out. So finally, the police left later on Sunday, and they stopped by now and then. But then it was mainly just the Warrens and myself. Father Charbonneau had to go back to celebrate Mass in his parish for Tuesday morning, so he didn't go back with us. So it was pretty much the Warrens and myself for that period, except for Monday night.
Okay, now you're the only person I know who has been actually on a case that I've talked with the Warrens, and I've always been curious as to what they do when they're called in on a case. So they're on the phone. Do they do EVP work? Do they try to communicate with whatever's in there? Do they take recordings, pictures? What do they do?
They worked with the press.
What? Ed and Lorraine Warren?
There were only a few things I was involved with them. They were dear friends of mine, and I don't like to say anything bad about somebody, but it was a long time ago. The recordings that were made were of interviews with radio reporters. When the burn occurred on Lorraine's hand that I described, Ed was recording it, and there was it was a reporter from the radio station that was recording it, and he got Lorraine's expression of pain, and there's me in the background saying that a blister was forming, and Ed wanting her out of that house. So that's on tape, but it was in the context of a radio interview. So he was pretty much handling the press. There was no attempt by Lorraine that I could see to communicate with anything, and we were just observing phenomena. EVPs at that time, in those early days, were not really, they were known, but there was no attempt by them to do it, and they weren't even taking any photographs that I was aware of, and I would have had a camera with me had I known this was going to happen. I just thought I was going to have dinner with Ed and Lorraine. So there was very little control. There was very little research, in my opinion, except just observing these things as they happened.
I'm shocked. What was the point of them being there?
Well, to get publicity.
Oh my God!
And I was trying to keep as I say, I was trying to keep myself kind of a low profile, and I'll tell you, Noreen, one of the greatest shocks of this case was not what happened in the house; it was what happened in the newspaper. The only paper, and there were papers all over the world who picked up this story. The only one that really got it right was the National Enquirer.
No way!
Temple. You could have knocked me over with a feather. And the reporter was in there, and I talked with him. And of all the papers, he got the story straight, the right sequence. It didn't seem to be an awful lot of exaggeration, unlike some of the other papers. And that was really. I often mention that to my colleagues in journalism over the years. That was an example when they really got it right.
Oh my God! Of all journalists.
So presumably, had the Diocese of Bridgeport agreed to an exorcism, Warren would have set that up, and probably Father Bill Charbonneau would have come back. He was in a bad position. I don't know how he got away with what he did when I couldn't, but he was already a priest. He would have come in presumably and done an exorcism and this kind of thing, and it might have worked, it might not have worked. I don't know.
Okay, so what did he do? He blessed the house?
He just blessed the house, yeah.
That was
There were rumors that I performed an exorcism, and that's nonsense.
So what happened after he blessed the house?
Well, it quieted down for a while, and what is a house blessing? You're bringing in positive energy, and naturally that's going to cut off the food supply for a little while for these parasitical things that are feeding on the anger and the fear and the annoyance, and even the despair of these people. And off it went. So had I known then what I think I know now, I would have checked the outside of the house, the yard, for any strange things. But again, I didn't have any equipment with me, and there wasn't much equipment to have with you then in the first place, just tape recorders and cameras. Any EF meters at the time were not digital and wouldn't have told you much, and I don't put a lot of stock in those anyway. So, what I asked Bill Hall as he was writing this book, because he interviewed me pretty early on, I said, look around, see if you can find out if things were happening in other houses.
Yeah.
Around this at the time, because that's what Ben, my son, and I look for today. It's never just one house, it's never just one family, because these intersects are occurring generally over a relatively wide area, and you're going to find other things happening in places like this. So sure enough, he found there were other houses that were experiencing things. There were UFO sightings.
No
also.
Way.
Yeah, and this is what we find in these flap areas. But of course, nobody's ever really coordinated that until Bill Hall came along and started to put it all together.
Now,
he's since become a very good friend.
Oh, I know. I've seen a couple of pictures with you and William or Bill. Their house was in front of a big apartment complex. What about the houses on either side of them? Was there only on one? Was the house only on one side of them?
No, there were houses on each side.
Okay.
Then now there are not. The one I went to use the phone is not there anymore, I believe, and there's a parking lot. But there was an apartment building in back. So yeah, this was an urban area, although a side street.
Now, what about the house next door? Did they have any activity?
Well, when I went over there, they were pretty afraid, but they didn't mention anything to me. They were probably afraid to. All I did was call the Warrens and ask them to come back into the city, and then I ran back to the Goodens house and stood with them on the sidewalk. And as I say, fortunately, the police had cordoned off the street because who knows what, we would have walked into the middle of this crazy crowd, and I don't know what would have happened. So,
oh, my God. Well, so then all of a sudden, it stopped.
Well, did it? I don't know. Supposedly things, it was still going on as far as we were concerned when we were thrown out of the thing on Tuesday. And supposedly when Marcia went to the hospital, and Jerry Solfin told me this, so I trust him. He was one of the researchers from Duke University, now Dr. Jerry Solfin, that things had happened at Fairfield Hills Hospital, and that things kept happening in the house. Now, of course, the family ended up selling the place.
I heard they couldn't. So they eventually did sell it, huh? I saw an article that they couldn't sell it. Nobody wanted it.
Well, I can't imagine why, but they eventually did. And, of course, Jerry and Laura Gooden have both passed away now. And the only people really left are Lorraine Warren and myself and a couple of the police officers who were there. Little Marcy, Bill could never find her.
Yeah.
And sure enough, several months after the book was out, it was revealed that she had gone back. They knew she'd gone back to Ontario after she became old enough, and then she'd moved into Ohio with some guy who said he really never got to know her very well. And then she passed away. She had a very sad story, multiple sclerosis, and died. It was in a wheelchair and died just this past February, at the age of 52.
Oh
would have been.
God. Isn't that kind of strange? Their 7-year-old son had cerebral palsy, and then Marcia comes down with MS.
Yeah, that did strike me. the health effects of these phenomena are something that I've always been curious about, and I don't have the expertise to really research it from a medical point of view, but I've asked others to do so. I've noticed cases. I have worked with psychiatric social workers in some of these cases, and there have been cases of chronic fatigue syndrome seeming to result from being drained by these entities, if that's what the cause was, and a lot of naturally psychological issues. Children who have gone through this early in their lives, such as Marcia at the age of 10, really don't want to talk about it later in life, not that you can blame them, and they often have a lot of social adjustment problems and sometimes neurotic or even psychotic issues later on in life. Not always, but it seems to result in a lot of bad news.
So when they sold the house, do you know where the Goodens went after they sold the house?
No, I don't. They didn't want people to. Another question is, did things continue in the house after new people moved in?
Right.
Well, that depends who you talk to. I was never able to get a straight story on that, but supposedly, as I say, some people said nothing happened, other people said they did. And of course, that raises the question, was this thing or things, were they attached to the family? Were they attached to Marcia, or were they attached to the land and the house?
Right.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of factors that line up for these things to have to manifest. You know, every family has a certain amount of wear and tear, a certain amount of stress. Some families don't get along, but they don't have this kind of thing happening. So so in my experience, you have to have not only a lot of stress and pent up frustration and this sort of thing in a house, you also have to have geotechnical factors such as high water tables, clay or sandy soils, things of this kind that might line up to allow the conditions to manifest so that these things can occur. So it's not just the people and it's not just the parasites. There are the conditions as well at the site.
When did anybody ever do the checking into the historic the property and finding out what was going on before, if there was anything happening?
Yeah, I did, and then of course Bill Hall after me did, and as far as I'm aware, nothing really that would stand out of a negative nature had occurred there. But remember, Noreen, very often in these cases, if this multiverse thing is correct, you could have things that have not yet occurred in our time stream occurring that are very negative. I ran into a case in Massachusetts some years ago where there appeared to be a murder going on in the yard in a parallel reality that had not occurred in the past of that site. But a parasite can still feed on it because it's still real, even if it's in a parallel reality. They seem to be able to feed. It's almost like dealing with an octopus. It's almost like having tentacles in different worlds at the same time, feeding on negative events. I've seen that in a number of cases.
No way. Oh my God.
So there might have been something negative that hadn't even occurred yet to us.
Wow.
Yeah, we're in Wonderland here, through the looking glass of this stuff.
Yeah, it just seems strange that with all the timeline, she had lived with them for so many years, and then all of a sudden this starts up.
Yeah.
And then supposedly it renders off. It slows down or it stops.
Well, they do seem to, usually, it's very unusual for a poltergeist of this strength, I suppose, or if I'm talking about plural entities, to go on for more than it did, sometimes just for a few months. The longest one I'm aware of was in Scandinavia in the 19th century, and it went on for like several years. That's extremely unusual, and there must have been factors that I don't know about that permitted that to occur. But generally, one like this, it'll kind of come and go. The worst one I dealt with was the following year in New Haven, Connecticut, and it was very strong. There were 6 or 7 different entities that I identified, and it would get very strong, and then it would kind of die away for a while. And then it's like I guess 3 meals a day. You have a meal, you kind of are satisfied, and you don't go back for several hours for anything more to eat. So and that reminds me of that. It's like these things get enough to eat, and then they kind of die away for a while, then they come back.
So when you're looking for these entities that might be causing this type of a thing, how are you identifying them? How are you finding out that there are that many?
Well, that's kind of interesting because I don't consider myself doing the psychic medium thing, but after a while, you kind of know what to look for. In my case, there's a lot of electrical phenomena on my skin. I'm the kind of person I cannot wear a watch. I can't wear my wedding ring. I can't, have any kind of jewelry at all because I get rashes and I electrocute everybody with static electricity.
Oh my
It's bizarre.
God!
It's a wonder I can wear my glasses. But there's that. So perhaps that it's electrically that I kind of feel these things. There is there's a lot of research being done. I'm thinking of a particular study on horses that you're kind of coming and you're in back of them, and they sort of know you're there even if you're kind of far away. Mm-hmm. There certainly are DC direct current electrical fields around the bodies of every living thing. You've heard of Kirlian photography, a certain way you can take a picture and you can get a picture of what supposedly is this bioelectric field around a leaf or anything like that, or really any object. I think that when these fields are, because a lot of them go way beyond our bodies, when they contact the bioelectric field of another living thing, whether it be in this parallel world or another one, you kind of know that the other is there. And it's like, this is why you may feel like you're being watched, because there is someone nearby you. You feel the presence of someone in a room even if you can't see them. It's probably these bioelectric fields interacting. Right, which I say are far beyond the perimeter of your own body sometimes. And I think that's how I'm able to tell, or anybody's able to tell, sometimes when there are these entities present. And you kind of, there's more to a person than physical presence. There's an aura in the broad sense of the term, and there's a certain feeling you get in the presence of something that's hungry and hostile, such as these things. That's a survival instinct we all have. If we hadn't had the feeling that the saber-toothed cat was looking at us from the rock ledge behind us, looking at us, for lunch, we would never have survived as a species. So I think this is really the same thing. These things have picked on the human race, among others, for a very long time, through all of our history, and we have a certain survival instinct that tells us that they're there. It's educated out of us as children in modern society, and so we say, oh, that's nothing. We don't pay any attention to those feelings, and that's a mistake. And I've learned to kind of relearn that, and a long time ago, and I can sort of see these things coming and feel them coming. And if they know that, if they have your number, then you can get the upper hand. But in a case like Bridgeport, where I didn't know any of this stuff yet, I still could kind of feel them. But I think it's a survival instinct. It's like feeling any other living thing. So, but I could very clearly count 4 of them in this case, coming and going.
And none of those entities came home with the Warrens or you.
No, there are about 9 different species of these parasites. Some of them. Because we're well protected here at Castle Eno, so to speak. We have a lot of protection, and but I've never really had anything come home with me. I've had things try. I'm thinking of one case in Rhode Island in '98, and they'd gone into the car with me, and it gradually dissipated because it was attached to the land. It couldn't come any farther.
Oh, interesting.
But we're well protected here, and you just sort of you keep it positive, and there's no food for them, and they're not going to come with you if there's nothing to eat. That's true.
I love that. Yeah. I've never heard that before.
Well, that's what it is, I think.
Oh my God, that's awesome! Wow, that's quite a story, Paul. Usually from anything that Ed and Lorraine Warren have been involved in, they usually make movies out of them. Do you think they'll ever make a movie out of this?
Well, it has been discussed. I know they've asked Justin Bieber to play me. I'm joking. That's starting rumors. But, yeah, probably the right age. But, no, there have been there's talk of this, and there's been talk of Bill Hall's next book, which is about our other case in Central Connecticut. I think we've discussed that with all the starting with ghosts and getting the UFOs, secret base, and all this business. That's coming out this August, and there are already studios interested in that. I never had that kind of luck with my books. I'm told they're too intelligent, and Bill's are very intelligent too. But I guess he's got better luck than I have.
Oh my God!
So there may be a film coming down the pike about this, especially when they found out that the Warrens are involved.
Oh
See,
yeah.
for years, the only thing written about this case really were the old newspaper reports and the thing in my book, Faces at the Window, which came out, of course, 25 years after this occurred. So there wasn't much out there about this. Bill Hall, who was a young boy at the time, remembers hearing about this as a child growing up in Bridgeport, and I believe he was one of the people in the crowd on one or two of those days. So was John Zaffis, the Warrens' nephew. And I first met John. John is quite a bit younger than I am, but I first remember meeting him outside this house. I believe it was him. Yeah, it was John. And Lorraine introduced us, and he was pleading with her, "Oh, please, Aunt Lorraine, let me into the house." And she wouldn't do it because I think he was like 10. And but that's when I first met John. He was a kid outside this house. So anyway, but I mean, that's what it was. But a lot of people who grew up in the area were curious about it, remembered it. It became kind of a legend. And Bill Hall is the first one who really gathered all the information and wrote it up. And there were things I didn't know.
Wow.
When I talked with Bill, and have done so many times since, we have generally a lunch meetup every month, and because we're working together also I was helping him with this other book too, the next one about the Central Connecticut flap, and so it's interesting. But whether it'll be a movie, it probably will, but I'm not on the inner circle in that. So.
Oh gosh. Well, so what's this other book? We haven't done a show on that one, have we?
No, not yet. It's called The Haunted House Diaries.
Oh yeah.
Yes, maybe I'm sure you've heard about it. And he's got one that'll be August 17th, I believe, is the release date. And it's about the case, and I do believe we've talked about it, but it's in Central Connecticut. It started in 2005. Well, actually, it started 60 odd years ago. Sort of a 1793 farmhouse, lovely spot in Connecticut, and you've got a family that has lived there for 6 generations. And when the woman read my book, Footsteps in the Attic, and she said this multiverse idea is the only thing that explains the circus that goes on around here in a paranormal sense, things seemingly unrelated to each other that just happened all the time, and she grew up with it. And so she contacted us in 2005, and that was the year Ben, my son, who was 13 years old, started to work with me. And my wife and I discussed that at length about whether he should, and he's a natural. He always has been. So that was one of his first cases, that and the haunted policeman in Vermont. And we went to Connecticut, and you could sit at the dining room table and feel people walking around all around you, as if you had a number of worlds sort of sharing the same space. One of the problems we ran into in that case was that you had these what we consider ghosts, which I think 9 times out of 10 are people just as physical as we are going about their business and other parallel realities, will see us the way we see them very often, and they'll think we're ghosts, and they're afraid of us because in their world they have the same folklore we have.
Oh.
And we had to work with the owner's great-grandparents, who used to have an apartment in their basement, and who were afraid in their world that our homeowner there was a ghost, when in reality it was their great-granddaughter whom they had never met. So,
oh my God!
So that's the kind of thing you run into, and it really gets tangled up. We were there with a film crew, because every once in a while we're approached about doing a pilot for a TV show, and then the networks always come back and tell us we're too intelligent, people won't. But until recently, because now they're saying they want more authenticity, so we'll see what's happening with that. But we were on camera, and there was and this is where it gets really crazy. There are other species who will occasionally assist us in this. There is a world where there are what Ben refers to as the clerics. They are very, very tall, very thin, a little bit bent over sometimes, and they tend to wear these robes. Okay, they're going to think I'm ready for the
Oh my
myself
God!
here.
Wait a minute.
This is as real as it gets.
Do you see those people? Do you see those?
Yeah.
You see them?
Sometimes, yeah. There are photographs of them. They, as a matter of fact, there's one very frightening photograph taken in an English church many years ago that people are really terrified of. It's one of these clerics. I recognized it immediately when I saw the picture, and it had something over its face under its hood. They do that when they pray, and they are very benign looking otherwise. And we actually had one assist us in trying to move some of the portals out of this house onto another part of the property so that these poor people could get some sleep at night. And it worked for a while, but the magnetics being what they were, it all kind of came back. Now, again, this sounds like nutball stuff.
Yeah.
But, I tend to be a scholarly person with my feet on the ground, and this is real. And when you start to look at it from this multiverse point of view, everything changes from your perspective. The things stop being dead people, and they start being very live and interesting beings and people from a lot of interesting places who are really essentially our neighbors, many of whom are very aware of what's going on and are very aware of us, and are very often, neutral, but sometimes they're willing to help, and sometimes not, because they might be parasitical and feed off us. I mean, anything and everything is out there, and everything and anything is possible, and you get into the depths and the abyss of quantum physics. This matches up.
Oh my God! Okay, you know that movie, The Others?
Yes, I've seen it once.
Is that true? Can that happen?
Well, I got somebody said, I don't usually watch a lot of this stuff, but somebody said, you have to see it. It reminds me of your theories. I started to get excited as it went on, and I said, my gosh, don't tell me they're going to get this right. But sure enough, at the end, they blew it. Because these people were dead, and they were, and nobody's dead. Death is impossible in a world where you're alive in so many different versions and so many different realities. You can't have death even for the body when you get down to it. So nobody gets that. Well, some people do, but people will come up to us after lectures and say, that explains what's been happening to me all my life, and I never understood it. Well, we could be wrong, but it does seem to work out time and time again when we were on these cases. So the others, I think, kind of really just couldn't make that step at the end. By the way, we've never been allowed to see the footage from that pilot we were making there at that time, because one of the places we went we've mapped out a triangle in that area, and the farmhouse is kind of the beginning, and then there's another.
Is that the Bridgeport Triangle?
No, this isn't Bridgeport. This is farther north.
Oh.
But it's not that far from Bridgeport. This is sort of the Litchfield Triangle, as we call it.
Oh.
And the second point seemed to be a farm which is abandoned, and there's no farming, and there was all sorts of military activity centered there in 2009 and 2010, and we believe there might be some kind of facility operating there, because there were aerial photographs of this place you wouldn't believe. You could only see from the air, but they tore down a farm building, and there was this huge, thousands of square feet wide metal sheet facing the sky, and obviously there had been excavation around it, and that was there for about a year, and then they put the farm building back, and there's still no farming going on. And we contacted the intelligence community, was told to back off when he asked about this property.
Oh my.
So the question being, well, what does the ghosts and stuff have to do with the government? Well, wouldn't we just love to weaponize the paranormal? I think somebody, whether it's the government or someone else, is very aware of this multiverse thing, is wondering how to use it, and that's why they have to go where the intersects occur. So why would you have something like this within 100 miles of New York City when they could be out in the desert where nobody will see them in New Mexico or somewhere? Because they have to go where the intersects are if they want to research it and use it. That's my theory anyway. And that's why the military will show up in a lot of these flap areas where there are ghosts and UFOs and poltergeists and all Bigfoot and all this stuff. There have been several photographs of Bigfoot in this area too. Things seemingly unrelated, but are related because they're all part of the multiverse phenomena that the government is very interested in.
Wow.
I think that's my theory anyway.
Wow, that is so interesting. Wow, you have such a great life, Paul. Such a great life. Oh my
Oh, my
God,
wife
it's so awesome. Um, Thank you again so much for being on the show. So let's tell them again. Now you have written 7 books and 2 of them were bestsellers. I only found 4 and I didn't have time to go back. I have found 4 of these books.
Well, the first 2 were written in the 70s, very small, and they were published in Chicago, but they are out of print, and they're going to stay that way, because I didn't know anything when I was writing. All right, the 2 of them are historical books. One was a newspaper history of Rhode Island, which is of absolutely no interest to anyone in this audience. And the 4 you encountered are the 4 that are still in print, and that is Faces at the Window, which I mentioned, which has the Bridgeport case in it, Footsteps in the Attic, which people might find interesting, and then Turning Home, God, Ghosts, and Human Destiny, which is more of a history of the paranormal and what it might mean, along with a couple of case histories. And then the other one is Rhode Island, a Genial History, also of no interest to this audience, which, much to my surprise, is used in several school districts here in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
And then there is a new one coming out, although they say it's not going to be until 2017. It's Cosmic Journey, Behind the Paranormal, and that's Schiffer Books is going to bring that out. We just signed the contract, and hopefully they'll bring it out a little sooner than that. But that is a general survey of the paranormal best and what we believe are our best radio scripts over the years.
Oh, wow.
And it gets into all these cases.
Oh, wow. I'll have to check out those other books. Now, also, let's go over, I have the banner for your radio show. Tell them again about your radio show.
Yeah, that's every Monday evening, 6 o'clock, live, drive time, Boston, Providence, and it's WOON 1240 AM on the dial. And most people probably are not going to be in that area, and you can get it at onworldwide.com live. And if you can't listen live, there are over 600 hours of free podcasts on our website, behindtheparanormal.com.
Yes, and I have all that, and it's done correctly.
Thank
Paul.
you.
Paul, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I just love having you. I'm going to get you again.
Well, thank you, Noreen. It's always a pleasure. It's always fun.
Thank you so much. Good night. Oh, and happy 4th of July.
Oh, thank you. And the same to you.
Thank you. Good night, Paul. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Wow. Everybody, thank you again, Paul, for being on the show. It's always a pleasure having you on. You're so intelligent. I love listening to you. Everybody, thanks for joining me tonight, and I hope you enjoyed the show. I can do some shout outs. How you guys doing tonight? Everybody okay? Oh, thanks. You guys liked the show. That was pretty interesting. Yes. So let me do some shout outs tonight. So let me start with Cat Angel. Forgot. Cat has a show tomorrow night. Oh. What? Cat, are you having a show right now after mine? It went by too fast. Let me see. Oh, thank you. All right, well, let me... Kat, I know Kat has a show tomorrow night, but is she having a show tonight right after my show, guys? Paul Inu is wonderful. Absolutely a very intelligent man. All right, well, I'll read... Let me know. Okay. Oh, and one tonight? Oh, Cat. Okay, so following my show, guys, everybody go over to Cat Angel's show. I didn't see that posted, or I would have posted it. What's the show on tonight? Meow. What's your show on tonight? Oh, thank you, Aaron. Well, I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July. I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July for those who may be leaving us right now. So happy 4th of July, and thank you so much for those who have joined us. I really appreciate it. I will, and don't forget, next week I have another show. So I want to wish. All right, so let me do some shout outs. Am I still live? Okay, let me do some shout outs. Oh, Puppy's in a hangout? Oh, okay. I'll be there tomorrow night for sure. All right, so let's do some shout outs, guys. Cat Angel, Nanny Tristan, Yvette Bissett, Sean Hathaway, Mary Dallas, Joe Moyer. Nice to see you, Joe. Unique Annie, my sweet Annie. Diane Hilbert, Para Princess Patricia, Hippie Hugs, with love, Michelle. Val Charlotte. Wow, Charlotte, long time no see. Charlotte and I go way back, way back. Butterfly Kisses, Maria Amador, Kalinda Espinoza, Sean Hathaway, Project Shadow Stalker, Jackie Marusi, Sharon Allen, Trent Bennett. Oh, also thank you to my mods. Tiffany Twisted, I Am Paranormal. Starry Night, nice to see you guys. Bobo, wow. I haven't seen you guys for a while. Wipers 86. Anybody else want to shout out? Hey everybody, really thanks so much for being in the chat. Oh, Quizzle. Oh, Charlotte, I don't see you in chat very often. God, Charlotte and I go back way back to 207, 206. Shadow 14, Joey the Darkwalker, Diane Zeman, of course, she loves Paul Eno. Hi, Diane. Diane and I go way back, 206, 205, something like that. Mystic Hazard, Susie Farrell, Jay Vin. Anybody else want to shout out? Debbie Bass. Hope you guys all have a great weekend. Great 4th of July. Be safe. Have a good holiday. Oh my God, the sweat's pouring down me. Anybody else? Oh, Aaron was in. I saw Aaron. He left. Angel Simmons. What? I didn't see Ginger Simmons tonight. Going to have a barbecue Saturday with my daughter. I'm looking forward to that. You guys all having a great night so far? Oh yeah, Diane. Paul is amazing. I just love having him on the show. Did Aaron leave already? Aaron Belkey? Miss Patet V. Sorry if I don't all pronounce your names properly. The sweat's pouring down me. I mean, it's just streaming down me. Oh, Ginger, there you are. Hi, Ginger. She kind of hides in the back. Oh, Catherine Elaine Brabham. Hi. Okay, anybody else want to shout out? Oh, there you are, Aaron. Oh, was Whitney Van Lyke. Whitney Van Lyke. I don't know if I pronounced it right again. She doesn't like it because I don't pronounce her name properly. Whitney Van Lyke. Oh, Ginger's the movie star? Oh, really? Oh, that's nice, Diane. Okay, I'm not going to go over to see the puppies. But I will be there, Cat, tomorrow night. And all my oh, thank you, Mystic. Oh, David Coffin. I will be there Friday night, Cat. I will be there. Just do your posting and I'll share for you. Oh, Carrie Ellswick, Castaneda. And Mary Dallas. I think I said hi to Mary Dallas. No, I'm not going to go over to see the puppies. Now, if they were kitties, I might be tempted. But the puppies are adorable. Okay, guys. Oh, man, I'm dying. Okay, so I'm going to say goodnight. Don't forget, gosh, you know, I didn't bring my calendar. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't bring my calendar with me. But don't forget Unique Annie, Sweet Unique Annie. Enchanted Warrior. Oh, thank you. Now, I know Royce Hinman was in the show earlier as well. Okay, everybody, have a great weekend. Have a safe and happy 4th of July. And I hope to see you all next week. Tybee. Good night. So I hope to see you all next week. Yes, I have 8 cats. I love my kitties, and I hope to see you guys all next Thursday, same time. Don't forget, we'll be posting for all the shows, and so I'm gonna say goodnight to everybody. Okay, I gotta end this. Okay, everybody. Good night. I love you, and stay safe. And again, happy 4th of July. Good night. Love you guys.